Hello, and welcome to Sobercast. We provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in a podcast format. We are an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into the virtual basket. Also, if you're a member of NA or have friends that are, please tell them about our other podcast, NAPOD. NAPOD features NA speakers and workshops in the same format as Sobercast. We upload a new speaker every day, and it's easy to subscribe by searching for NAPOD, N-A-P-O-D, all one word, on any podcast player app, or go to napod.xyz if you'd like to listen online. Hope you enjoy the podcast and have a great day.
When I was about age 9, I drank some kerosene. Age 10, 1941, the Jack Alexander story came out. I was 10 years old, and I read about it. I read it a couple of times at least. My father was an alcoholic, and I wish he'd go with these people because I wanted him to go with them, and, you know, maybe something could change. He didn't. Age 12, I wanted to go outside the house and drink, and I had too much parental control. Age 15 and 16, I started going out, you know, drinking a little beer down by the railroad tracks. Age 17, I got away to a resort, and I just took to alcohol like a duck takes to water. I really, maybe not consciously, but at least I certainly was beginning to turn my will and life over to the care of alcohol. I loved it. I really did. I just, every bit of it, any element that was connected to it, and the effects and everything else, and I'd get through the hangovers and all that because I was, you know, I was just able to, I couldn't get up for work, but all that stuff. Anyway, at the age of 18, my mother sent me to a psychiatrist because of my drinking. And at the age of 18, I was also sent to my first AA meeting, and that was in 1950. And I went, and I thought they were a nice bunch of people, and maybe someday I'd come back and play checkers with them, because they were really great. One fellow said, "Isn't it good he's coming in now because the traditions are coming out?" So anyway, John came back, the guy that gave me a ride, came back next week and said he'd take me back to the meeting. I said, no, I'd be able to handle it myself. And I went right back out drinking, and then about, maybe 10 or 11 years after that, I went to Alcoholics Anonymous because I wanted more control, especially in the marriage. I managed to stay sober 4.5 months. My wife marked it on a calendar. I went back out drinking, and later on, about 7 years after that, a guy named Roy helped me to get back to meetings. He said he was an alcoholic, and I said, I understand. He says, I go to meetings, and I said, I'd like to go. And I followed him around. He was like a man's man. He was like a father that, you know, to me. And I said I'd never drink, and I put down the date, August 11th. I said I'd never drink again. I put down the date, August 11th, 1966, and I was drunk by Christmas. I came back into AA. I fell back in. I got through St. Patty's Day. I always drunk on St. Patty's Day. And this year I didn't, and I got 10 days after St. Patty's Day, I told my wife I'm going to a meeting. Once I got my foot out the door, I headed right to the bar. I had a beer, and then I had another beer, and I really can't tell you how much I drank. I know I scratched up the car on that. I came back to AA. These times I went out because of guilt and remorse and all the other reasons we go out. 100 excuses, but there's no reason to go out. Anyway, I came back into, I was back into AA in 2.5 months, and I had to drink, and I didn't know what to do. And what I did was this. I just kept going to meetings, finding out what to do. A guy named Marty from the Bottom of the Barrel group says if you have to pick up a drink, if you really have to pick up a drink, postpone your decision for 24 hours. Next morning, I got up and I said, God, probably tomorrow I'll pick up a drink, but just for today, help me stay away from that one drink of alcohol. And I've been asking God every day since then. You know, it's a simple thing to help me to stay away from a drink of alcohol. I used to say, keep me away from a drink of alcohol. But that's really putting too much on God, and I have to be a little part of the action myself. So I haven't had a drink since and it's been good. The marital situation, I solved that with twin beds. One in Miami and one in Florida. Anyway, no, that was a sad thing, and that was built on dishonesty, and I had just never been completely honest with my wife, and it was really a horrible blow to her. She's a wonderful woman, and we still. I saw her recently, as a matter of fact, and she's just a great lady. But I was able to come down to Florida, and I was able to get active, and I got active in a group, helped to found a group, and it was wonderful. I was talking to the pastor of the church and explaining about Alcoholics Anonymous, and Bill Wilson. He says, "I know Bill Wilson. He comes down every winter. We have conversations together. He's a great person." And so anyway, for me, what happened was this: that I went to the group, and I didn't think I could get sober. I really didn't, because I had tried, or sort of half-tried, whatever. But they said, believe that we believe. Joe Mack says, look for the little bit of good and the bad, and forget about the little bit of bad and the good. Huey says, the trouble shared is a trouble cut in half. I had all those fears, and I built up all the barriers, but eventually those were able to come down. I love AA. I love the conventions and everything that has to do with it. I love the meetings. If you get to a lot of meetings, it's easy. If you get to a few meetings, it's hard. If you get to no meetings, it's impossible. And I'm so grateful that I'm sober. I've had even in the last 2 years, there's growth. Sometimes it's small, minuscule, whatever, but I had a heavy defect, and I got kind of back a little bit to the church in my youth, and a little bit more anyway, and got help in the area of the defect. And outside, we can go outside. Of course, Alcoholics Anonymous has a singleness of purpose. We're here for alcohol, and that's it. But if an individual wants to do other things, that's fine. And so I got help to go some other meetings. But anyway, I like the story about the professor and the paradox. He said, we surrender to win, we suffer to get well, we die to live, and we give it away to keep it. And I heard a story about a guy. He came home and he told his wife, he says, when I was drinking, I was a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. She said, I know. They sobered up the wrong one. Anyway, it's been good. One last thing, because I have much more experience behind me. But the little boy came home to his father and he said, Dad, will you play with me and talk with me? And the father says, I'm busy, I'm reading the paper. Here, I'll give you a jigsaw puzzle of the world. When you put that together, bring it back to me and we'll talk. And the kid came back in just a very short time. And he said, how did you do that? How did you put it together so quick? The boy said, well, on the back of the jigsaw puzzle, there was a picture of a man's head. And once I got the man's head together, the world was all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. See, next we have Tommy C. Tommy D.C. Go on, Tom.
3 minutes? 5 minutes. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Tommy. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm a member of the Monday Night Speakers Group in St. Petersburg, Florida. We all know about a drunk-a-log, so I'm going to tell you what happened to me at my first AA meeting. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous at the age of 23. I was too young to be an alcoholic. I was getting married in 3 months, 6 months. I'll never get that story straight. Been here a long time. I was going to get married. My wife-to-be said, go to AA or else. Her and I went to our first AA meeting. She was 22 and I was 23. I walked in, and all I saw was people who looked like me today. And I said, oh, I'll be out of here in 2 days. I'm too young to be here. These people are 40, 50, 60 years old. My life is over. They asked me if I was an alcoholic that night. I said, absolutely not. You know, the most important question that was ever asked to me, or one of them anyways, in Alcoholics Anonymous was, do you like what happens to you when you drink? I hate what happens to me when I drink. And that allowed me, that statement there allowed me to come back to another meeting that I didn't want to go to. I got sober 8 miles north of Boston in Melrose, Massachusetts. I went to churches that were in the cellar, the basements of the cellar. I hated AA. I was scared to death of stopping drinking because I had gone into the horrors and DTs before, and I was scared to death that would happen to me. The guy says, can you come back to another meeting tomorrow without drinking? I says, I don't think so. I was honest. I think the honest I was at any time in my first 8 or 9 years in AA was, do you like what happens to you when you drink? I hate it. That was as honest as I could get. So I said, no, I can't go to another meeting. And my wife-to-be said, he'll be there. I told him that I was getting married. I had to do a lot of things before I got married. She said, he'll be there. So I had a terrible attitude in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had no idea what AA was, but I needed to really change my attitude real quick. I had enough trouble to get here at age 23, 18, 15, 14. I speak in front of a lot of young people today, and I tell them that they're looking at their future. That's me. You're looking at your future, because I was just like you when I got here. I can't believe how young they look. At the end of 30 days, I went to AA for 30 days in a row. And I had a sponsor after the end of 3 days in AA. I had a sponsor, I had a group. And I woke up one night after 30 days of being sober in AA. I had this horrible dream, and I was scared to death that AA wouldn't work for me. Because of you people in Alcoholics Anonymous, I tried to get sober all my life, long before I got to AA. I tried everything to get sober, and I couldn't get sober. And I came in here, and you guys gave me hope. I got hope at my first AA meeting. The problem with that was that I had a head full of booze, a belly full of booze, looking a way to get out of here because I didn't know what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I'm sure happy you were here when I got here. So at the end of 30 days, I became willing to do whatever my sponsor told me. You know what that means? I'm a halfway measure kind of guy. I do the first half of the first step. I'm powerless over alcohol. I don't drink no matter what happens to me. I don't drink. And I bring this body as it is everywhere I go, and I don't drink, and I don't like what's happened to me. My biggest problem, how was I going to go to my bachelor party and not drink? My sponsor told me, by the way, I have the same sponsor that I came to AA with. The day I got into AA, I have the same sponsor. His name is Arthur Kay. He makes coffee at Longboat Key on Tuesday nights. He's sober 7 years. Same guy. Saw me when I got here, saw me when I got married, saw me when the kids grew up, saw me when I got divorced. I've been through everything possible I could be in AA with your help. And not drink. It's about not drinking. It's about me growing up. You know, Bill Wilson talks about emotional sobriety. He talked about emotional sobriety in 1956. And I'm just getting to that point, you know. I mean, I don't like me when I'm sober. I don't like my behavior. And I finally had to take a look at what was happening in my life and become willing to do whatever my sponsor told me to do because I wanted to drink. I don't really want to drink. I showed up at AA. He told me, you can drink when you show up at AA and you talk to somebody after the meeting and tell them you want to drink, then you can go drink. That happened to me several times. I went home and got down on my knees. I was able to have a day of sobriety. It's all about the things I hear at AA that I don't think I hear. I changed that attitude. I got back into my program, the way AA teaches it. The fellowship works great in AA, but sooner or later, I better have a program. And sooner or later, I better have a power greater than myself who will be there when the stuff hits the fan and I want to drink. And I have that power. I had a lot of trouble with my ego because I said I never have a problem with God, but I blame God for giving me free will. I'm a manipulative guy. God gave me free will, and it's His fault that I act this way sober in AA. I had more trouble in AA sober than I ever had drinking because of my inability to grow up. And at the end of 15 years in AA, I had to get a divorce because my beautiful wife and I could no longer tolerate my behavior, or she went one way and I went the other way, and it was a tough thing. You know, and at that time, I finally realized that I need to turn my life, not a big deal, but turning my will over to God and do the best I can and try to be one of God's kids and not hurt one of God's kids. I'm a big guy up today about giving free rides to people. People gave me a lot of free rides when I hurt their feelings. They let me go, give me a free ride. I need to give a few more free rides around here. I need to forgive people who I think hurt me. I still brought into AA a perception of a little kid, and he gets to be still a little kid when he's growing up in AA, 45 years, 50 years old. You know, and I've changed. I work on my program every day. It's not a hard thing for me to do because you taught me how to do that. I believe in sponsorship. I believe I sponsor a lot of people, but you know what? I tell them from my experience what happens, and I let them have their own road because if I have expectations of their behavior, I'm in a lot of trouble. I'm going to stop in a minute. I just want to tell you that he did meet Bill Wilson. It was an unbelievable experience. We were going down to meet him, and I'm a control freak. I told my wife, make sure everything is done before I get home because we're going down and have a wonderful weekend. I got home, nothing was done. She asked me to vacuum the floor. I kicked that vacuum cleaner all over the house. I went down to New York with the toe this big. My wife was in Al-Anon. She told everybody what happened to me. I had met Bill Wilson that afternoon, and I said, what happened here? My sponsor said, Bill Wilson just come in. Now, that picture up there of Lois and Bill, that's just how they both looked. I met both of them. That's exactly how they looked. And the nice words that he said to me, kid, he says, he signed my big book, Ever Bill, and he said to me, kid, keep coming, and you'll be okay. I drank because I wasn't okay. I came to AA. You guys fixed me, and I'm okay today. I'm the guy that I wanted to be when I grew up. I came here with 3% of being honest. Today, I'm a lot further ahead of that. I believe today that I create my own problems, and I created enough of them, and I said one day, why don't I try to create some good stuff? And today I can tell you my life is 97% positive opposed to being 97% negative. And I owe it all to people that came before me, and especially the new people in Alcoholics Anonymous who show me what it was like to come into here and say, I'm too young to be an alcoholic. I love what you've given me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tommy. That was great. Forgot to mention Tommy's sobriety date was 11/7 of 66. 64? Excuse me. Well, let's correct that. It says 66 here. 64, I'm sorry. That's a big difference. Absolutely. Okay, next up is Rick D. Is Rick D here with us today? No. Okay. Let's see. All right. Rick here? All right. That's okay. You're here. That's what counts. Rick, I'm going to let you give your own sobriety date, so I'm sure I'm right about that. I'd like to introduce Rick D.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rick, and I'm a very grateful alcoholic. And I always say grateful because had I not been an alcoholic, I would never have found Alcoholics Anonymous. and the wonderful 12 steps that are here. I remember when I first came in, we used to have I got sober on October 6, 1966 in Connecticut, and we used to go to the convention at Moose Lodge in Moose, Connecticut. Is it Moose? Something like that. Anyway, huh? Moodus. Thank you, Moodus. And I remember I used to see the speakers come up here, and I say, one day I want to be one of those guys, and I want to be one of those circuit speakers, because I had this big, incredible ego at the time. And now that I'm here, I don't know what the hell to say. 40 years later, I don't know what the hell to say. I think people that came before me were very graphic about it, because to me, sobriety is a process, not an outcome. And in that process, a lot of things happen. And I think that in my early sobriety, a lot of my sobriety was like some people's drinking stories. I really screwed up that bad. I'd done a whole lot of different things that I shouldn't have done. I mean, I heard things when I first came in, like, well, if you're a crook when you came in and you get sober, you'd be a better crook. And I believed it. Okay? And so it took me time to really get this program. And rigorous honesty was very, very important for me to get. When I first came in, I was a meat cutter, and we worked in independent market. And in the independent markets, you used to have you earn your salary on the scale. And so I remember if you came in and I put a roast beef on the scale, and it was like 450, I'd say 650, and I'd wrap it, and then I'd feel guilty. And if you came in after that person and the roast beef was 450, I'd say 250, and I'd wrap it, so I could try to balance this out in my head and try to get to this rigorous honesty piece. It was really a challenge for me to get rigorous honest. When I started getting sober, I was terrorized. One of the preceding things that happened before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous was I had drank enough to go into the DTs and hallucinating. In 1966, there was this guy named Speck that killed these nurses in Chicago, and I thought he had come into my body and was commanding me to kill my family. I actually picked up a knife as they were walking up the stairs, and a friend of mine who was there said, "Rick, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, what I just told you." And he grabbed me and pulled me out, and we went out the front door. And when I came back, we stayed out for a while, and I came back, and I decided, well, you know what? I was drinking a lot, and I was smoking a little pot, and so maybe I won't smoke pot anymore. Okay. And so I came home from work one time, and I had just about 2, 3, 4 beers maybe. Came home, and the family was going to bed, and I started to get this feeling again, and I got really, really afraid. I really got frightened and terrorized that, that somewhere between asleep and awake, I might actually, commit this act. And what made me know that was that I had gotten up in the middle of the night sometimes in a mocha state after I'd been drinking all night. And actually went and peed in the corner of the room thinking I was in the bathroom. And so I knew that there was a possibility I would not have control. And so I left the house, and I walked, and I walked, and I walked, and I walked. And I came back, and my then wife, Joni, used to go to a psychiatric group at the Bridgeport Hospital. And so I asked if I can go up with her, because one time I had been there. And I remember this guy that was there, his name was Al, and he had talked about he was in AA. And so I went up, and I didn't talk to the psychiatrist. I just went up to him. I said, "Al, what's the story with AA?" He had someone call me the next day, and I went to my first AA meeting. And one of the things I learned early in my sobriety, quite a few things, but one of the things that was significant about me going to Al when I went up to the hospital was that there was a seed planted there was a seed planted. I had not even paid attention to it. It had no significance to me until the time came, and it had significance. And I remembered Al said something about AA, and I went to AA, and I asked him about it. The other thing that was significant was, in those days, was that when Marty, who became my sponsor, picked me up, he had 6 people in the car. Okay, and well, I tried to go down and impress them, and at that time they didn't have all these fancy colognes, but they had Canoe, and I doused myself with Canoe, and I think I choked everybody out in the car because it was winter and everybody was opening up the windows, you know. And so, but what I learned, very, very importantly, was that there was a meeting on the way to the meeting, there was a meeting at the meeting, and then there was a meeting on the way back from the meeting. And it was the meeting on the way back from the meeting that made sense to me. Okay? The ride up, I was critical of everybody in the car. At the meeting, I was like embarrassed to be there. And on the way back, there were clarifying questions and clarifying answers that were happening. And so I became an AA superstar after a while. I'd speak all over the place, and I was very much into speaking, not to give a message, but to let you know who I was, you know. And so I had this incredible ego on one side, and this other part of me that felt like crap, you know. So I was polarized. I didn't have any normal feeling, and it took me many, many, many years to get that. One of the things that's very, very important about going to Alcoholics Anonymous and going to meetings is that that's the only place that I can really get a perspective on where I'm at. I can see where I was, where I'm at, and where I can be with or without a drink. It's the one place to get the perspective. And there were times in my sobriety that I had spaces that I didn't go to a lot of meetings. Okay? And I don't know, but I've had some serious miracles that I'm not going to get into right now that happened despite myself, despite who I was, despite my ego, despite the kind of person I was. God still had mercy on me and had some miracles perform in my life. I'd like to just say that I came in to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had barely a GED, and I went to school. I went into the helping professions. I made a conscious decision on the 12-step that I want to carry these principles in all my affairs, and so I chose my profession in the helping profession, and went to school, and I have a doctorate degree now, and I'm a professor at an institution. And you know what? That's not really what's important. What's really, really important is that I can come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I can work with somebody else. That gives me joy. That I can pick up the chairs at a meeting. That if I have to clean off tables, that I can clean off tables. That has more meaning to me than anything else. I've seen AA gurus around here. I've seen people with sobriety and having all these people following them and crap like that. And you know what? It's really about humility and working at it. Someone once told me, if you got to tell people you have humility, you don't got it. And I'm working at it, and I work at it every day. And for that, I'm a very grateful alcoholic. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. This is a humble situation for me being up here, I'll tell you that. All this sobriety, wow. I am impressed. We have next, we're into the class of 64. Tommy M. Tommy M just spoke. Whoops. We'll get there yet. We aren't organized, but we're trying. Okay. Thank you, Tommy. It was good. I'm just nameless here. Okay, let's go with... we moved you ahead. That's why we get you out of order there. Next. Okay, all right. 64, no, that's happened. 65, 66. I had trouble with mathematics, so I drank a lot. That's why I drank. 66 is going. Diane H. Diane H. Is she here? She's right here. 1958. 1958.
Good afternoon. My name is Diana. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is October 31st, 1958. That's 48 years. My home group is a Riverside group in Tampa, Florida. You know, I wondered this morning when I came up, or this afternoon when I came up and sat down up here, what in the world I was going to say. And you know, I remember what it was like when I first came to AA. In fact, when I first came to my first AA meeting, I came as a non-alcoholic. I can remember hearing people say that there was nothing worse than a woman drunk, sloppy, and I didn't fit that picture. And so I had a hard time with that. It was like I was calling myself a tramp or something or other. And I had a hard time even saying I'm an alcoholic in the mirror. And anyway, I could say that my life was unmanageable, the first part of our first step. And I worried about this for a long, long time. I thought that I would. And then I came down to the conclusion that I must be an alcoholic. Nobody would tell me. I used to try to manipulate things so somebody would tell me I was an alcoholic and nobody would tell me. And, oh, bless their hearts. Anyway, I had to make the decision for myself. And I came to the conclusion that no non-alcoholic, which is what I classified myself as, would not spend as much time wondering whether they were or they weren't, so I must be one. You know, I come in the back door. But let me tell you my state of mind when I sat in my first meeting. I was very confused. I didn't know where I was at. I was a runner. And I can even remember way back throwing a pin at the map and saying, this is where I'm going to find happiness. Isn't that a sick feeling? It's as bad as looking in the mirrors at the bar. I drank out most of the time and wondering just what's wrong with me and how can this be fixed, never really getting the answer. Anyway, this happened to be up in Anchorage, Alaska. You couldn't run far enough away. I got in Anchorage, Alaska. I went there for a 6-week visit, and I stayed for 9 years. Now, what did they do in Alaska? They drank, you know. The bars never closed when I went up there. There was never any problem with getting a drink or anything. Oh, they did close on Election Day. I think they did that. But there weren't too many election days because it was still a territory. And, geez, I hate to date myself. I voted for statehood. How many here have voted for statehood? One of my unique things I can say. But anyway, I wanted to talk about what happened at my first AA meeting. You know, it was the way I went in as a non-alcoholic, but I was greeted with love and compassion. What a wonderful thing. They shook my hand. They weren't looking to the door to see who else was coming in or who was there. And I felt good. I had that warm, fuzzy feeling that I get in lots of AA meetings. I eventually I hated women. I didn't trust them. They always looked like they had everything together, and I was falling apart. So I went to a closed women's meeting up there in a house. That's how the women used to meet. And I think I made the 7th woman in that house in Anchorage, Alaska. And after I had practiced in my house, saying I was Diana, an alcoholic, in the mirror with nobody else there, when it came around to me, I introduced myself as an alcoholic. Now, when we had a meeting in Anchorage, Alaska at that time, downtown at the Lusac Sign Library, there might be 80 people there, alcoholics and non-alcoholics. And there was about 4 or maybe 5 meetings a week. That's all there was. One of those meetings was a closed women's and the other was a closed men's meeting. So, you know, that's we are so blessed today, aren't we? We have all these meetings in such a short area that we can get to, so we are blessed in our fellowship. Anyway, when I introduced myself at that women's meeting, it was a great thing. You know, I can say all the time that I I'm an alcoholic. But unless I start accepting it within my heart and my head, it means nothing. I started, I think, a little on the acceptance of that. I met this man who took me to my first AA meeting. I married him. So, you know, when I sponsor somebody, I have to waive the right on that. Don't get in a relationship the first year. What helped me stay sober at first, you know, they read chapter 5 at every meeting. And always that thing that stuck out for me, those that don't make it don't have the capacity to be honest with themselves. And I didn't want anyone to say, there goes Diana, she doesn't have the capacity to be honest with herself. Isn't that sort of, but that was a real good thing for me because it helped keep me sober. Now, what have I done in my sobriety? I did select a woman to be my sponsor. And she was a tough one. She was the one that would always tell me something at the meeting that would make me very furious. And anyway, I did my 4th step, and I took my 5th step with Millie, and then she asked me if I'd speak at a meeting, and I said, no, I will not. And I said, I'll mop your floors, I'll keep your books, I'll do anything, but please don't ask me to speak to a group of people. Then she said, did you ever stop to think if you weren't thinking so much of yourself and thinking of that one person that might hear something you have to say would be helped? Oh, she always said those nasty things to me. So, anyway, I got active in service right away. We did not have the wonder of styrofoam cups when I came into the program. We had china cups, and I washed cups. I got to the washing cup detail. And you know what we would say? We would talk to each other. I could always talk at the kitchen sink. And we would talk about it, and I can remember hearing, you know, you'd think somebody else would come in and do some of this now and then. Just, well, those that get involved, those seem to have a happy sobriety. I have been very active in service in several different areas. I have lived in, I had to leave my home group, which was very hard, and went to Georgia. And in Georgia started a meeting, which incidentally is still going in that town because my husband and I were through there, oh gosh, I guess it's been about 8 or 9 years ago. But at that time it was still going. And then we went to Europe and started another group in Europe, a French-speaking group. And what a wonderful joy. I've also served as a loaner and communicated with people all over the world, out on a ship, down in South Africa. And we would tell a little of our story, and they'd tell a little of the story. And the group we started in, or was working with in France that we lived at, I wrote to General Service in New York and asked for the literature. And they sent us the literature in French. And Guy, who was the Frenchman, would read the first portion of chapter 5 in French and tell a little of his story. And we'd read it. My husband was also in the program. We'd read it in English and tell a little of ours. And it, indeed, as Bill said, is a language of the heart. I knew what he was talking about. Now, I took French in school, and when I got to France, I started speaking, and my husband said I spoke my own language. He couldn't understand it, but I was waving my hands, and I was working this thing just wonderful, but I was doing the best I could, and that's all we ever have to do. It's all we ever have to do. I have tried to remain very active in AA. I go to meetings. I sponsor people. I have a sponsor. Aren't we blessed? Aren't we blessed? Any place I have gone in this world and had to live there and be new, I never was alone. Even though I was a loner and classified as one and corresponded with other people all over the world, I did not feel like I was alone. Even though my husband took my inventory and I took his, I could always sit down and write a letter to somebody else. Anyway, how do you tell how we trudge through the program, as it says, and we are able to establish a little bit of sobriety? I have always felt that I have another drunk coming, but I've also, along with that, have always felt that I don't have another recovery. Our alcoholism is a progressive disease, whether we are drinking or not. And you know, sometimes if I think of that, it scares the tar out of me, really, to tell you the truth. It means that I need to stick with AA. I need to stick with the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous and do the best I can. And that's what I try to do. And God love you. You know, we are so fortunate. We have friends. We never have to feel alone again anywhere in this world. And thank you.
Thank you, Diana. See, we have two Tommies. One has spoken and one hasn't. We have a Tommy M and a Tommy C. Tommy M? Is he here? He's already spoke. Tommy C hasn't spoken? Has he spoken? We're so anonymous. I don't want to give last names here. Here we come. Tommy C. Let's hear it for Tommy C. 11/7 of 66. Thank you.
My name is Tommy D. I'm definitely an alcoholic. And the guy that spoke earlier, Rick, is the guy that got me in the program. And I love to speak. Is that I got a big mouth, I got a big ego. Is that I was 26 years old when I came into AA. I drank for a period of 8 or 9 years. And the reason I say I got a big ego and a big mouth is that it's hard for me to get the words right a second because I was so moved by my friend Rick. But anyways, that I come from New York City, and I swore I would never drink. I watched my old man go down the tubes from drinking, and I saw what it did to him. And at 53 years old, he died a chronic alcoholic. And that was in 1967, and I was sober about a year. And I was so proud to be in AA. I was so grateful that I went to New York City to see him in the hospital. And he was all yellow and tubes in him. And I said, "Pop, I'm in AA. I'm in AA, Pop." I said, "I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good." And he says, "Go downstairs and get me a half pint. Can you go downstairs and get me a half pint?" And me being the super duper guy that I was in AA, I said, "No, I ain't no half pint." I must tell the story to 1,000 people. And my sister told me a few years ago, when she was 14 years old, she went downstairs and got somebody to buy a half pint. She said he was dying anyway. And this is a sneaky, insidious disease. Is that I was so on fire for AA, is that that I was so grateful that in the beginning I wanted to drink so bad, but as time went on, is that I felt so proud to be in AA. Is that and I like my friend Rick, we spoke all over the place. I mean, all over the place. Long Island, in Massachusetts, all over the damn place, and we had a ball. We had a ball. We ran and ran and ran trying to catch this thing sobriety, and it was right in front of us all the time. And I was sober. You know, the thing that one of the speakers said here, the other Tommy, he said that we don't have to drink no matter what. Is that one of the first things I heard in AA that I never heard before in my life is the guy that grabbed my hand at the door when I came to the first meeting. He says, "Tommy, we don't have to drink." I said, "We don't have to drink." "No, Tommy. No matter what happens, we don't have to drink." And as time went on, is that proved true to me. Is that I was married for 12 years to my first wife. I went through an ugly divorce. Is that I got custody of 3 children. And for the next 7 years, I raised 3 children with God's help and the help of a lot of good women in AA. And I had to learn a lot of things, but I never stopped going to meetings. Is that in 1986, I married a wonderful woman in AA, and many times have been up and down. But I learned from people in the program. He says two things: you don't drink and you don't run. You fight it out, you hack it out, and things come out for the best. Is that last year, is that a couple of years ago, my mother passed away, and my mother died a horrible death of cancer. And I didn't drink. Is that, and the thing that it wasn't about me anyway. It was about her. And she died in New York City, and my sisters couldn't believe that from Connecticut came down all these guys from my group up in Connecticut. There must have been 20 guys at least. And all these guys in AA, they're over in the corner laughing and joking and patting each other on the back and patting me on the back. And my sister said, I can't believe. My sister told me one time, Tommy, you're so smart. You're so spiritual. I said, I'm nothing. If only you could meet my friends. And she met them. Is that in the past 4 years we moved down to Florida. Is that I was a meat cutter all my life up in Connecticut, and I had a good job, and I retired down here, and it was quite a transition. Is that nobody knew me down here, nobody cared who I was down here, in AA and outside of AA. Is that and so I had to turn around and start going to meetings all over again and make friends. Is that get a home group, get a sponsor. Is that and recommit myself to the program. Is that I go to a meeting at least 3 times a week at 6:30 in the morning, and it's just 3 of us that go there most of the time, and it's just a powerful, powerful meeting. Is that last year? Is that a few years back? Is that my brother Eddie? Is that a bunch of years ago? Is that he went to a couple of AA meetings, and it was not for him. And last year, at 53 years old, he died a chronic alcoholic. And so I say this is a sneaky disease. There's a guy in my area that has been around AA for a long, long time, and I found out that he told me that he's been drinking for 1.5 years. Is that nipping? And I told him, I said, you can't nip your way into this program. Is that so the answer for me is a couple of things. Is that one, every single morning I get up in the morning and I hit my knees and I ask God, help me not to forget for 1 second what I am, a chronic alcoholic saved by grace. I say a prayer for a lot of alcoholics, and at the top of the list is my daughter. Is that I got a daughter that's a bipolar, cocaine addict. I don't know if she's an alcoholic, but she's got problems, and I haven't seen her for 1.5 years. And every single day I put her in God's hands. That's all I can do. Is I got a son in Burlington, Vermont. Is that he's a drug addict and alcoholic, and right now I think he's on a marijuana maintenance program. He seems to be doing good. Is that but I could never ever be paid back AA. Is like my friend said, is that a lot of times I go to meetings and they said they need some help in the kitchen, cleaning up the kitchen. I don't. I just get up and I go in the kitchen. I start cleaning up. And I can't tell you that how annoyed I get is that when these people that are sitting on their butt come into the kitchen, well, Tommy, thank you very much for doing that. I said, don't ever thank me for cleaning up a kitchen. Don't ever thank me. That's paying back AA. Is that I got a sponsor in Connecticut who's got 50 years of sobriety, and you can always find him in the kitchen. You can either find him in the kitchen or picking up some little baby who's crying, so the mother can turn around and get some sobriety. It's a tremendous gift, and I thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. Next, we have Betty L. Betty L. Right here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Betty. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of the Sebastian Freedom Group of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they are here, a few of them this afternoon. 2 of them brought me up here. I've gotten on in years, and I've learned something new in AA. I've learned how to accept help. Sometimes I need it, a different kind of help than I came here to get. Like you, I have enjoyed every minute of this conference. The speakers have been absolutely marvelous. This morning I listened to Mildred talk about spirituality in AA, and I have thought a lot about it. I said maybe I'll talk about some spiritual experiences I have had in AA. And I've had so many I couldn't tell you them all, but I'll tell you a few. I got here on April 26, 1963, and that's 44 years ago. I got here, honestly, I drank my way in. I woke up in strange places with strange people. The worst of which was one morning I woke up with a gentleman who didn't speak English. I had a hard time getting out of there, figuring out where I was, you know. And things like that kept happening to me. And in 1962, I got a job I shouldn't have gotten. I went for the interview half in the bag. The guy kept me waiting an hour. And I think I got the job because he was just ashamed of keeping me waiting. And I met the receptionist. I sat with her for an hour. What I did not know was that that woman was 2 months sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and her husband had joined with her. She went home and said to the husband, "Boy, we hired one today." And I would call in drunk, and she would cover for me, make me hang up so that I didn't talk to the boss, and tell lies for me. She was good at it, you know, and I didn't know what was going on. Well, to make a long story short, she took me to my first meeting in Manhasset, Long Island. And I started going to meetings there. And I joined in Huntington, where I was living. And I loved it. I really liked it. I was sober. I know it was less than a month. They had given me on that job this envelope full of money. I had to run a raffle on payday. And then it was called the Employee Benefit Fund, this money. Well, you can imagine the employee that was getting the most benefit from this envelope. So I'm sober 3 weeks. Let's say it's 3 weeks. And they come to me and they say that the employee committee thought that money belonged in a bank. Somebody was getting suspicious of me. And they thought it, and would I turn it over? And I got suddenly sick, and I was out sick for a couple of days, you know, trying to figure the problem out. At least I brought the books up to date, and I figured out that I owed it $45. And I made a few calls. Nobody would give me a dime in April of 1963. Nobody. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but something inside of me said, try and stay with this AA. I got in that car, and why I know it was less than a month, I drove to Jones Beach. Gas was 33 cents a gallon at the time. And I looked at the water, and I didn't have to pay to get in. They opened Jones Beach on Memorial Day weekend. That's how I know it was less than a month. And I prayed and I said, God, please do something for me. Tell me how I can solve this problem. I don't know what to do. But I know I want to stay with those people. Please help me. And a peace came over me. The angst of being in a jam like that. Because if I lost that job, I was out of the apartment. I was sleeping in the car. I was paying the rent by the week. I couldn't put a month's rent together, you know. But this peace came, and I turned around, and I drove back to Huntington. I went up to my apartment. It was a Thursday, and I knew I had to go back to work the next day. And came a knock on my door. And this girl, I didn't have a phone, so people just came around and knocked. It was about the bill that I didn't have the phone. She came up. She had met me at a meeting. She said, I thought you might like to go into Manhasset with me. I know you like to do that. And I'll take you to Howard Johnson's for dinner. And I said, yes, that would be nice. I didn't tell her any of my problems. She got up and she said, can I use the bathroom before we go? I said, sure. And she said, I want to give you something. And she reached in her bag and she handed me an envelope. She said, I got a raise at my job today. And I got $45 more. Or I got this much more. She handed me the envelope. Then I got the last payday. And I decided to make believe that I didn't get it till next payday and give it to you today. I know you need something. I don't know what it was. And there was $45 in that envelope. It's hard for me to tell that story without crying. But God was smart. He did not give me $50 because you know what I would have done. And I went back to work, and I've often said I never looked back. I mean, God said, here you go, kiddo. You can stay with it. I didn't get everything I wanted in AA, but I got a life beyond my wildest dreams. One of the things that happened to me along the way was through somebody I drank with in New York City. I got with them, and they introduced me to a woman named Mary Ellen, who is Spanish-speaking, and she worked at GSO. And this was like 7-8 years into my sobriety. And to make a long story short, I got to work there for 18 years. And I went to AA meetings and conventions like this all over the United States and Canada, England, Ireland, Mexico. A life beyond your wildest dreams being used by a higher power in a way that I really did well and I was very happy with. And I had many, many wonderful things happen. I was given the responsibility in 1980 of coordinating the New Orleans Convention. And that's I'm in awe of the people who put this together. It's not easy. It's not easy. We were down in New Orleans on an advanced trip. We'd had some problems. We were working hard. We had a meet with the host committee at night. And I got off the elevator, and a guy from Shreveport, the delegate, came up to me and said, I know you've had a bad day, but I got a girl from Shreveport. I have promised her for 2 months that I would introduce her to you. And he didn't say more than that. He said, please cooperate with me on this. The girl came up to me. She threw her arms around me, and she said, you are Betty Little. She said, I woke up in a treatment center a little more than a year ago. It was the 12th time I was there. She said, when I came to, they were playing your tape in a meeting. And she said, I identified with what you said, and she told me what it was that I said. I had never said that before that particular talk that they taped. Before, when I gave her talk, she said, that did it for me. I've never had another drink for a year. I play that tape every single day in my car. And that was my second one. I retired from there, and through Tom I worked in a prison in North Carolina in the DART program. And when I had a group in there, I ran it. Let me tell you, I didn't get that sober. I was in charge. One week we got 3 new guys in the group off the bus that came in every week. When I returned to the office, I said to my boss, thanks a lot. You gave me 2 badasses and a retard. He said, go back to the group or quit. I went back to the group the next day, and the retard was missing. I said, does anybody know where he is? And one of the badasses raised his hand and said, I see him down by the weights, acting crazy. I said, you think you could find him? Now, I would never let a guy out of the group like that. Not me, but God was speaking. He said, I found him. I said, you'll come back, won't you? He said, I'd be back, but I found him. And he did, and he brought him back. And you know what happened? He put himself in charge of that confused, challenged young man. And he followed him everywhere. He helped him with the assignments. He couldn't write and couldn't read. He interpreted it. If I used a 4-syllable word, he would say to me, Miss Betty, how many times do I have to tell you you can't use words like that? They don't understand it. And I would say, do you understand it? And he would say, yes. I said, you explain it to them, And my Bible group would say, I anointed him, But my point is this. If you stay sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, anyone, whether you're new, you're around a while, or you're an old-timer, God will use you, and that's the greatest gift that AA has for any of us. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you, Betty. Hey, folks, we're going to run a little bit over, but if anybody's earned that right, I think these folks have. Let's hear it for them. I'm impressed, that's for sure. Next, we have Ray F. Ray F. Is Ray with us? Ray F. Okay. Ray is not here. We're going to now go to Katie P. And Katie's sobriety date, I got a couple of these out of lines. I hope I don't have too many resentments. I know I got this lady out of order. But in any event, it's a long time for all these long-timers. And Katie Parker has a distinction of being sober since 9/21 of 49. Whoa! I'll bring it up to you.
My name's Katie, and I am an alcoholic. And I belong to the 605 group of Satellite Beach, Florida. I came into the program very young also, just like Tom. And I was 21 when I came in. And the only reason I went in was because I was going to lose my job. I was going to lose my home. My mother was going to throw me out of the house. And all dire things were going to happen to me. So I had heard in a beer joint about this guy that used to come in every evening and order a Coke. And he'd stand at the bar and drink the Coke. And I watched him for quite some time. And finally I asked somebody, I said, why does that guy come over here and drink a Coke? He owned a restaurant, and I know he had plenty of Cokes at his restaurant. But he always came over to the beer joint. And this guy told me, he says, well, he used to be a terrible alcoholic, but he joined Alcoholics Anonymous and doesn't drink anymore. Well, now, for that to happen, I must have been about 18 or 19 years old when I heard that. For some reason, that stuck in my mind. And when my drinking got bad enough that I was going to lose things, I told my mother, I said, you know, Mom, if you contact AA, I'll go. And I thought to myself, well, I'm pretty safe in that, because she was a teetotaler. She didn't know anything about alcohol or drugs, although she married one. Like Scott said yesterday, my father was also a CIA Catholic, Irish, alcoholic. And my mother was a teetotaler, but she stuck with him. And I thought, my mom won't know anything about AA, so there's no way in the world she could contact them. And I thought I was pretty safe. And I came home from work one evening, and she said, Katie, don't go out tonight because a lady from AA is coming to see you. I almost dropped my teeth. I couldn't believe that she had actually found it. So I don't know what I expected. You know, a drunk coming in to see me, to talk to me about drinking. And when this lady walked in my door, she was so beautiful. She was about 65 years old. White hair, done beautifully, had expensive clothes on, and her shoes probably cost my month's salary, you know. And I thought, this old lady's probably had one too many, is it okay? She probably had one too many sherries at her bridge club or something, you know. I didn't believe this woman could ever be falling down drunk like I was, not remembering where I was, waking up places that I didn't know where I was, just doing terrible, terrible things. Irresponsibility was my middle name. So I listened to her, and she told me things that I felt in a little bit of her story. And I thought to myself, my mother told her what to say. She couldn't possibly know that I felt the same way. My mother is the culprit. Well, I found out later that we all have the same pattern. We all do the same things, most of us. I won't include everybody in that. But it's a disease that tells you you don't have a disease. And it's so baffling and cunning that no one can understand another alcoholic. My mother knew nothing what was going on in my head. If she did, she'd have probably hit me over the head with something. But I was so alone, and whiskey did everything for me that I couldn't do for myself. I'm quite tall. I'm 6 foot tall. And in high school, I always wanted to be the 5'2", blonde, blue-eyed cheerleader. And when I drank, I immediately became that 5'2", blonde, blue-eyed cheerleader, complete with pom-poms. And I thought it was wonderful. I'd found the answer to everything. But, you know, I didn't stop there. It just kept building and building and worse and worse. And I didn't think nothing else can happen to me. Everything's happened to me. But when I told my mom I'd go to AA, so I did. I told this lady, I said, yeah, I'll go with you. She said, well, I'll pick you up. And I said, fine, because I didn't have a car. Didn't know how to drive. Thank God I didn't know how to drive. I'd have probably killed somebody or myself or whatever. But God's always looked out for me, and He made sure I didn't know how to drive. Well, I got to the meeting, and here were all these old people. Remember, I was 21, and these people were in their 60s and 70s and 80s, you know, and I thought, my God, when I get that old, I'll quit too. What's left? You know, you'd almost have to get that old. So when they weren't introduced to me, and I said I was a new person and everything, these old-timers, you know, with 50 or 60 days would come up to me and say, you're too young to be an alcoholic. You can't be an alcoholic. I spilled more than you drank. I said, well, if you hadn't spilled so much, maybe you'd have gotten here sooner, too. But it was a joke, you know. They treated me like a little mascot, patting me on the head and so forth. No one took me serious. And when I had about 30 days sober, I felt so darn good, you know. I thought, well, now I can handle it. You know, I know what to do now. I'll only drink beer. Well, I only drank beer, only drank wine, I only drank anything I could get a hold of. And when I started drinking in high school, and this was when World War II was on, and they told me that liquor was rationed. You had to have a liquor book, and you had to be 21 in order to get one. Well, I was only 17 or 18, and I didn't have a liquor book. So I had to go buy everything that wasn't rationed. And this was like king corn, cotton picker, guaranteed to be 30 days old. And it didn't make any difference to me because I didn't care about the taste. I never liked any whiskey. I've never had a drink that I really enjoyed drinking. I drank for the effect. It gave me that euphoria. It gave me the ability to be somebody that I always wanted to be. And I did crazy things. I was a class clown. I was, tried to make myself fit in. And I could only do that with alcohol. Well, one day when I was working, I had gone down to the liquor store, and the only thing they had that wasn't rationed was apricot brandy. And I was sipping drinks out of it, I'd go to the restroom, take a big swig, and I could get through the day that way, the afternoon. But then I noticed above me were all these fruit flies, these little gnats that get on peaches and apricots and all that. And they were all above my head, just buzzing around. And I'd try to blow them away, like that. And of course, the apricot brandy went right up with them. It was embarrassing because I was the only one that had the fruit flies around me. I did a lot of foolish things like that. I always took my bottle to work. I was never without a bottle because I had to have it to be able to do what I had to do. I'd go down at noon and get a bottle, and it'd be gone by the time I got off from work. And it was a rat race. I was driving myself crazy. But after I was sober 30 days and I tried to drink socially, but it never happened because when I took the first drink took me. I couldn't manage anything that was after that drink. I couldn't assure you that I was going to drink only 3 drinks because I knew I would drink until the bottle was gone. I never did learn the niceties of social drinking. I didn't have any social drinking. It was all alcoholic drinking from the very beginning. So that lasted about 3 years. I was in and out of AA, bouncing back and forth, and just couldn't get sober. And I thought, there's something they're not telling me. These other people are staying sober. They're not telling me something. So I kept going back and get feeling a little bit good, and I'd start over again, and I was in and out like a rubber ball. Well, when I finally got fired from my job, and they did everything to help me. They truly did, but there were no hospitals where you could take alcoholics. If you wanted to dry out, you could sign yourself into the insane asylum, and they would dry you out. But you were in there with all the nuts too, and I wasn't sure I didn't belong there. But it was a terrible time for a woman to be an alcoholic. They were looked down on. A man could sober up and put on a clean shirt and go out, and everybody just thought he was wonderful. Isn't that marvelous? John's quit drinking and he's doing so good. But you let a woman do the same thing at that time. It was like nobody would ever believe that she was an all right person after that. They gave her no credit at all. And it was very hard, and I was glad that it was anonymous. But of course, everybody knew I was a drunk. Why wouldn't I want them to know I was sober? But I had such a spiritual experience on my last drunk. I was so sick. And I was out of money. I was out of everything. And I was in this little residential hotel. And I had no friends. None of the AAs, they were through with me, because they wanted to work with somebody that really wanted it, that wanted to stay sober. And I couldn't do that. So I couldn't call on any of them. My family would have nothing to do with me because I was a drunk. I was just like my father. And the only person that was left was the God that I had learned about in AA. I'd heard everybody talk about what a loving, forgiving God He is. And the God I was raised with, Catholic, was a God of vengeance. Every time I would do something, one of those nuns would say, "You're going to hell. God's going to get you for that." And I believed them. This was back in the days when you believed everything a priest or a nun had to say. And I certainly learned from that. But it was a dog-eat-dog existence. But when I had that feeling that God was up there and that He had come to me because I asked Him just 3 words, "Please help me." And I was so desperate and I was so sick. I didn't think anything could save me. But I felt this peace that Betty was talking about. I felt that come over me. And I knew for the first time in my life that there was a loving God. And that He would help me. All I had to do was listen. And I had this wonderful feeling come over me that I'll never forget. I still carry that feeling with me today that no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. As long as I live by the AA principles, I'll be okay. I've been through so many things in sobriety, almost 58 years. Next month I'll have 58 years of sobriety behind me. Of course, I came in when I was 4. But it was such a wonderful feeling. And that convinced me that all I had to do was depend on Him, let Him do everything, because my best thinking got me where I was, And my life has been wonderful. Of course, I've had tragedies. Everybody has tragedies in their lives. I lost 2 husbands to cancer. I had 3 little children, 4, 6, and 7, that I had to raise by myself. My husband passed away with cancer, and he was such a wonderful AA member. I was just astounded that the things that he did and the way he talked and the way he treated people. He was always for the underdog. Maybe that's the reason he picked me. I don't know. But I just thought the moon rose, or the sun rose and set in his image. He was just a wonderful, wonderful person. And we had the 3 little girls, and they had never seen me drink. Of course, they're older now, and I've got great-grandchildren, and, they've never seen me drink either. But it didn't make the difference because the disease still hit my family. And 2 of my daughters, the oldest one was an alcoholic and a drug addict. And my youngest daughter was a heroin addict. And my middle daughter's the only one that hasn't had a problem, but I'll say yet, because you never know when it's going to hit you. But it was such a wonderful world that I lived in, and then to have him taken away from me.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.